and how can you go to war when you have a child and you're being selfish and you should be looking after your child.
People have said that to you?
Yeah, written it. And
women have said to you,
yeah, it's quite...
You're a selfish mom
yes.
because you're a parent and you go and cover war.
Yeah.
Do they say that to your husband?
No, well, he doesn't cover war.
Well, he doesn't cover war.
They don't say it to male
do
war
they say it to male war
correspondents?
correspondents?
No. So, and I mean, interestingly, one of the women that criticized me in a sister newspaper ended up having a child herself and going to war. So that was very hypocritical.
But you know, I did read a profile of you where actually there was a woman writing it, and she was writing it in an empathetic sort of way. But I still felt it was very subliminally sexist, because it was all about how if a woman is a mother, there's a problem, there's a different set of problems with her covering conflict. And I'm just saying, the moment we sort of say that, haven't we accepted that there's more pressure on us and that we will be confronted with these set of questions that our male counterparts will not? Like, I mean, till this date, I have people interview me saying, oh, are you married, are you not? And I always turn around and say, I'm not going to answer that, because you wouldn't ask a male colleague of mine that question.
Yeah, well, I certainly feel that we're under more scrutiny, and in all things, I believe that women still have to show that they're better at the job than a man in order to get promoted. I mean, I don't know if you've followed, we've got this huge debate going on in the UK at the moment because the BBC has had to publish the salaries of their highest paid earners, anybody earning more than £150,000. And it's overwhelmingly men.
The gap in what men and women are being paid. Yeah.
So now there's a lot of discussion. Why is it because women are not so good at asking for pay rises and expect that if they do a job well, that they should be rewarded, whereas the men are sort of going to the pub together and
it's exactly the same
it.
Here. It's exactly the same here.
But I would also say, so, you know, I've been a journalist for 30 years now. I have never had a female editor. I've never had a female foreign editor. I've never had a female news editor or a female editor of paper. I've worked for several papers, which I think is shocking. I mean, when I started out, if someone had said to me that you might retire never having had a female boss, I would have thought they were completely mad. But so it seems to me, you know, progress for women has not been as much as I would have thought it would be. The other thing that I've found a lot recently, because I think that there are a lot of advantages being a female journalist, and I think we're better at listening to people. And I think people find women easier to talk to. And also because I spend a lot of time in the Middle East, I can go and speak to all the women where my male colleagues can't. So I think we are in a much better position to report from there. But in the last couple of years, I've found myself reporting on more brutality against women than I ever have before, whether it's the Yazidi women being raped by ISIS in northern Iraq, women in northeastern Nigeria being raped by Boko Haram. I mean, most horrific stories that I've ever covered, and that really shocks me, that it feels like there's more violence and more systematic violence against women than there was when I started out in this job.
I want to talk a little bit about a space that you have covered extensively, starting with that fortuitous invitation card to Benazir's wedding, which is Pakistan. Now, it's quite interesting, a lot of the Indian reaction to the resignation of Nawaz Sharif has seen it as an open and shut corruption case in the Panama Papers. And I've seen a lot of Indians commenting on social media saying, look at how accountable, they're one step ahead of us in accountability. We haven't even started with our investigations here. My argument as someone who covers Pakistan quite a bit would be that there's a structural drama here between the military and Nawaz Sharif, and I would go so far as to argue that this might even be a judicial coup. Is that how you see it, or do you see this as a democratic principle being upheld?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, you can look at it and think, actually, this is a great victory of accountability and, you know, a prime minister facing sort of ultimate accountability here. And so it looks positive. But at the same time, then you look at Pakistan's history, the fact that no prime minister ever finishes their term. They're always stopped. Usually it's the military taking over, and almost always they're accused of corruption. I feel very strongly that what Pakistan needs is for people to be voting these elected leaders out, not the military or the courts or whatever. I think it's good that the courts hold people to account. But, you know, it looks vindictive because it was only Nawaz Sharif and his family that were held to account when there were plenty of other names appeared in the Panama Papers. Mm-hmm. And I just wonder what's going to happen next. I do feel with Pakistan, I first went there in '87. I wrote a book that came out in 1990, Waiting for Allah. And that book almost reads as though it could be today, because it's the same people still running the country. It was Nawaz Sharif then, the Bhuttos. It's, you know, if this decision leads to an end of this dynastic politics in Pakistan, then that would be a good thing. And also, you know, another thing about Pakistan that I don't know any other country that is the same way. Every leading politician in Pakistan has a house in London, and their family are mostly in London. And, you know,
including Musharraf, who is yes. today, as a military dictator, lecturing Pakistan on upholding democratic values.
Yeah, I mean, the hypocrisy of that is, and this is the problem. I mean, actually, the basis on which the court disqualified Nawaz Sharif wasn't exactly all this corruption. It was under this kind of vague constitutional clause brought in by General Zia, under which politicians are supposed to act in an honest and reliable way. And, you know, as somebody said, if that clause was really enforced, none of the politicians in Pakistan would be able to run. So, I think there's a danger of this looking like victimization, the same that when I first went to Pakistan, it was General Zia, Benazir then took over, she was kicked out for corruption. And then Nawaz Sharif took over, then he was kicked out for corruption, and then she came back, you know, and you had this.
Well, there's a new player in the mix relatively, which is Imran Khan.
Yeah. So, well,
and he's the biggest gainer right now.
Yeah, this is a great victory for Imran Khan, because he's the one that's been banging on about corruption and about the Panama Papers, and so this looks like, you know, a victory for him and what he's saying. You know, I have other issues with Imran Khan. I have no reason to think that he's corrupt at all. I don't think that
what are your issues with him?
He's incredibly hypocritical. When I first was going to Pakistan, he was a well-known fixture in the nightclubs of London. And now he portrays himself as an Islamist who's written a book, an autobiography, where he writes about how shocked he was going to London for the first time and going to study in Oxford and seeing the way people behaved. He was part of that. So, you know, none of these people, unfortunately, are completely clean. To me, the biggest tragedy of Pakistan is its politicians. Pakistan is full of amazing people, full of amazing women, but the people running the country have, in general, not been amazing.
How would you describe, who do you think is the most promising, authentic political leader out of Pakistan?
I don't know, because actually, I mean, younger generation are not going into politics in Pakistan, and who can blame them? I mean, why would you want to go into that system? And Pakistan still needs to sort a lot of other things out. You know, it's still a very feudal country. It's still the same families that really run the country. So I can go back 30 years after I first went there and still know the people that were running things from that time. And that's not right. I mean, after 30 years, you should have a different group of people in power. You should have different generations. And it's handy for me as a journalist because I still have all the contacts, but it's not good for the country.
So I don't know how we're doing time. I think we have about 5-7 minutes left. So Afghanistan, which has really been your primary, in a sense, reporting beat, if I could call it that. Do you believe that the Americans, in particular, under Donald Trump, will change their approach to Afghanistan?
Well, I think we're still waiting for the tweet from Donald Trump on that.
And who he might sack next, right?
Yes, yeah. I mean, as people say, it's like an episode of The Apprentice, isn't it, every day? You know, I have no idea, really. I don't think anybody does what he's going to do about Afghanistan. It looked like he was going to send more troops. Then he suddenly had this meeting with Eric Prince from Blackwater about using mercenaries to fight. I mean, the fact is, in Afghanistan, the answer isn't anyway sending 4,000 or 5,000 more troops. At the moment, there's 13,000 NATO troops. At one point, there were 140,000 in Afghanistan, and they didn't defeat the Taliban. So I can't see that sending 5,000 is going to make any difference. What would make a difference is doing something about Pakistan's support for the Taliban, because there's no doubt that the fact that the Taliban had this safe haven in Pakistan, could get medical treatment, were getting funding, training, whatever, made it very difficult to defeat. I mean, when I was going to Helmand in southern Afghanistan with the British troops, it seemed a ridiculous situation. They were fighting Taliban, but doing nothing about over the border where more and more people were coming from. There was a sort of endless supply. So what was the point of fighting people? And again, you know, is military force the answer, or is it because people feel that the government of Afghanistan is not actually providing for them, that corruption is a huge issue there? Studies show that the average Afghan is spending 2 months of their 12-month salary on bribes. You can't get anything done, any legal case or anything, without bribing people. The police keep asking people for money. So it's too easy for Taliban to come into places and say, you know, we're going to impose law and order and get rid of all of this. And people think, well, actually, you know, this is a better idea. And so that, to me, is what needs to be tackled, that and the overseas support. But unfortunately, Afghanistan's getting a whole lot more complicated, because now you've got Russia arming some of the Taliban, you've got the Iranians. You know, Afghanistan's problem, in a way, is its location. You know, its borders with China, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, all these places that are trying to interfere. And I was last there 3 months ago in April, and was really shocked that you were going to die. The time I was ambushed in Helmand, I think, was to go without ever thinking. Like I told you, I'd never thought about being a war correspondent. I did used to go to pistol shooting because I quite liked at fun fairs in England doing the shooting at trying to win things.
Life takes you to strange, unexpected places. We have time for about 3 questions, and I'm seeing many more than 3 hands. I'm seeing a young girl at the second table. Please stand up. Second table, yes. Do you have a mic? Yeah, it's coming. Yeah. Yeah.
One of my questions here was, as war correspondents, or former war correspondents, do you feel that as a population, people around the globe have reached a certain saturation point when it comes to declaring war news? Because there's such a mass getting tiring because I was born and brought up in the Middle East, and I saw a lot of those person there growing up, and a lot of my friends, to be honest, were point was like, dude, it happens every day. When you are. So, do you feel that there is something that we do to resolve this, or is it a human problem?
I mean, I think it's a great question because it's a huge challenge for journalism. Because after you have seen, Yemen and those horrific pictures of children starving, and Syria and Aleppo and the baby being washed ashore. But there is a point to what she's saying, that when every day the headline is the same, how do you get people to care?
No, I think it is a problem. There's too much war going on. There's more war going on in the Middle East than any time in my lifetime, and in a more complicated ways too. So, we're on the same side in some countries as, same side as Iran, for example, in Iraq, defeating ISIS, but then on the other side in Syria. So, it's very confusing too to explain to people. It's not black and white. These wars don't end. Afghanistan's still going on, Iraq's still going on, Libya's still going on. So people get fed up. Afghanistan is my passion, but I find it really difficult to get my newspaper to send me there because, my editor frankly says that's yesterday's war. And I'm like, well, it's not, because more people are dying now. And we do still have British troops there. And we lost more people there and spent more money than any other war in recent decades. So people want to know, was it worth it? We should be covering it. But the fact is, with all the cutbacks in media, we've all got fewer correspondents. My paper, the Sunday Times, there used to be 4 of us in London going out covering things. Now it's just me. There's more things happening. It's become more dangerous. There are parts of the world that are, too dangerous for us to report on, which is not something I ever imagined saying a few years ago. So things are not getting reported. We're not reported on Yemen, really, on my paper, not because we don't think it matters, but it's hard if you're prioritizing scarce resources. And I also think your question, that it's a challenge to us too, to find ways of reporting things that still engage people when these things have been going on for a very long time.
Okay, anyone else? Let me give someone else a chance. Behind you, yes, please, yeah. In the blue shirt, as far as I can see, yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon. I think both of you could answer this question, as both of you would bring in new perspectives. Because, journalism, as they say, is the calling of the idealists. But what happens to your sense of idealism once you are out there on the battlefield? How does it affect your relationship with A, violence, B, what they call Marktpolitik or Realpolitik? What happens to an idealistic person who is averse to violence when that person is on the battlefield? How does it change you as a human being?
Well, let me try and say what the biggest challenge is, and then I'll hand it over to Christina. I mean, there was a point in reporting from Kashmir that I had lost count of the number of bodies that I had seen. And my ritual had become that I would be in the hotel and I would either get a phone call and say so-and-so's been assassinated, a bomb has gone off here, a bomb has gone off there. And I would literally at times be running out in my pajamas and t-shirt, not even having time to, get on a pair of jeans. And I think for me, the challenge was that I've seen so much of this that I must never stop feeling that this is actually death and violence, that danger of numbing, and yet you can't get sentimental because you have to tell the story. So where is that space where you're still an empathetic feeling person, but where that feeling doesn't overwhelm you and obstruct you from telling the story?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's easy to become jaded after a while, to sort of think, well, these people are in a bad situation, but actually it's nothing compared to what I've seen in Iraq or somewhere. But I think you don't lose your ideological feeling, because most journalists, I think, covering these kind of things, you want to make a difference. You want to tell this story because you want people to know and you want it to stop. I don't think the war is a solution to anything. And so I would like people outside to know. But I also, I've found that I'm still shocked by things. So last year I went to Aleppo. I have never seen so much destruction in my life. And okay, I'd seen pictures of it on TV before, but when you actually go there and you walk in the streets in the old city, and it's mile after mile of nothing but rubble of what was once a great city, I've just never seen anything like that. Similarly, as I mentioned, the stories of some of the women and the things that have happened to them in recent years is more shocking than anything I've heard before. So, it would be nice if the world was a place where you weren't still shocked, but I think we need to stay shocked about things.
Okay, anybody else? Yeah, left side, someone's waving out. I can't see you properly. If you stand up, it'll help me. Last question, yeah.
My question is, what are difficulties?
Okay, I can't see you. Where are you? Okay.
What are difficulties faced by independent journalists in the war area as compared to embedded journalists?
What's the difficulty between being embedded and not embedded? Well, I actually think like Kargil, for example, was not embedded because India doesn't have a notion of an embedded reportage, but you were still within the confines and the diktats of what the military let you do. So even if they weren't kind of taking you into battle and allowing you to travel up into a certain point, you can't really be a sort of, you can't really go solo in a war zone, can you?
Well, not now. So I think, like when I started out with the Mujahideen, I suppose in a way I was embedded with the Mujahideen. We just didn't think about it in that terms. But when the war in Iraq started, we had a big meeting at the Sunday Times about how we were going to cover it. And I and some of my colleagues were really against being embedded because we thought that would really compromise us, and we wanted to be independent, covering both sides. But actually, what I realized was when the war started that the people getting the best stuff early on were embedded people because they were kind of getting up front. And actually, I was what they called a unilateral, which meant I was sort of driving around in a car in between the fighting, not really knowing what was going on some of the time, and sometimes getting in front of the front line. So it was actually really dangerous. And the other thing was, Iraq having been a dictatorship for so many years, people there didn't really have any notion of a free press. So to them, we were no different than the military. We might as well have been embedded. But I do have an issue, when you're embedded, you're not completely free because you're dependent on the people you're with for survival. You often kind of befriend them, and if you see them doing something bad, do you then report it? It all becomes quite complicated. So, but it is part of the story, and as Barkha said, sometimes you can't get to these places now without being embedded.
Well, there's lots to talk about, but I'm out of time. I will only say more power to your pen, and here's to the next story. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Let's have a big round of applause for Christina.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Barkha ma'am, and thank you so much, Christina, for being here with us and for sharing your valuable thoughts, inputs, and experiences related to various aspects of reporting and journalism. Thank you once again, and it was really an insightful conversation. May I have a big, big, big round of applause once again for both of them. Thank you so much. All right, we'll have our next session right here at 1:30, and it's going to be Twitter keynote by Mr. Jonathan Harley. So see you all here in next few minutes.